Well, folks, today we got a bevy of news stories to bring you. We got some rumors, we got some actual news. We have a legend at Nintendo announcing that he's no longer making video games for Nintendo as he has, I guess, retired. We'll talk about that because I don't know if it's like a full retirement or if he's left Nintendo or what's happening. We got to go over that story as well, and so much more. There's some another like round of bad news coming from Ubisoft. That's never great. But also some positive news for a game that, at least rumor wise, is coming to Switch 2 in Crimson Desert. So we got a lot to talk about and a lot to go over. Before we do, I believe there's still time. I have to double check. I'm pretty sure there's still time to enter our giveaway for Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, which had reviews dropped today. It reviewed very, very well. I think like a 9 out of 10 average. Maybe it's at an 89 now. I'm not 100% sure. It's not one of our stories today, but I figured I'd mention it since we're giving away 3 copies for Switch 2. You can go ahead and enter it through the link in the description or the pinned comment. I'm pretty sure it's still active. I'll probably have to set up a new giveaway once that one ends, but setting that aside, we're also on our road to 200,000 subscribers. We're already a couple hundred on our way to 162. So, hey, we like to celebrate every 1,000. That's our next celebration. All right, let's go ahead and dive into the news and not waste any more of your time because I got a busy day, and so do you. Next up here, Nash Weedle. So, Nash Weedle says, Leak Express, Nintendo's bringing back The Legend of Zelda Ancient Stone Tablets. The obscure Satellaview exclusive game is coming to Switch 2, and it looks like it won't be the only one. Will Satellaview arrive on NSO as a classic console? More revelations in the video. And I watched the video. I didn't see too much in there that I needed to do much with. But what's interesting, obviously, about the Satellaview Ancient Stone Tablets is it was just a version of Zelda that we have all played and loved growing up, except they would offer new challenges and updates via satellite internet. That's what the Satellaview was. It was Japan only. It was really, really interesting for the time. You could find versions of it online to emulate that have all of the content. So it's not like hard to imagine that they could obviously bring all of that content, bring it back on NSO. That's what I assume they would do. There's a couple other Satellaview games as well. It's kind of a weird library, but you gotta remember, they're bringing back Virtual Boy, which is also a weird library. So why not bring back Satellaview as well? I don't know if there's any accessories they can really sell for it. Be kind of funny. People joked around today about they're like, hey, they'll sell you a literal satellite. No, you don't need a satellite anymore. Obviously for internet, it can be used for internet, but anyways, so that's pretty interesting. And one thing I wanted to bring up in this post as well is kind of a dual rumor thing. I'll kind of put a timestamp here, but as we're talking about Ancient Stone Tablets here, Nash Weedle confirms something else in the responses here. You go down here, it says, any news on Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 coming to Switch 2? So Switch 2 edition, obviously, for the first game. People want to know, obviously, about the second game. They didn't get enough detail with him to get that information out of him, but the first one with the Switch 2 edition later this year, pretty excited about that. So just throwing that in there, obviously, as a combo story from Nash Weedle. Next up, Nintendo did this weird thing. Look, they do these weird things. Here we are. There's a free update that's already out right now for Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. Swing into action as Dixie Kong in both single player and 2-player, local co-op, and race through high-speed versions of each level. In Turbo Attack, plus players on Switch 2 can enjoy enhanced resolution, higher definition graphics, and quicker load times. So basically, a free Switch 2 update. Although Dixie will be available to Switch 1 players as well. But on Switch 2, you'll get all those enhancements that mentioned. Obviously, Dixie as well. And you're seeing some of the Dixie gameplay here. I know it's kind of small. We'll blow it up quick. Look, guys, obviously, this is just really random. This wasn't pre-announced. Nintendo didn't have this in a direct. There was no hint this was coming. Just a very interesting, randomized update for Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, which is kind of funny because Donkey Kong Country Returns HD is a remaster of a Wii game. So, like, it's kind of interesting. It's like the third or fourth iteration. Now with the Switch 2 edition, I guess fourth iteration of the game. But hey, they added Dixie Kong. Probably wasn't like super difficult. You're seeing some of the visual differences here between Switch 2 and the Switch version. Most people probably wouldn't even notice that stuff. But for those people that can notice the crispiness of games, it's obviously crispier. It obviously loads significantly faster, which is going to happen when you have better storage. And then obviously they're showing off game share here for playing the multiplayer aspect, which is not a surprise. Again, this was a Wii game originally, so take that for what you will. I don't really have much to say about it. It's free. It's available now. I hope you guys enjoy it. It's not going to make me return to the game, but there will be plenty of people that have and will be returning. Next up, though, we have actually something more exciting. Yet another leak slash rumor coming from Nash Weedle, but this time for something that I know a lot of the Nintendo audience is interested in. How about native versions of Kingdom Hearts 2? And we have two sources for this. So first off, Leak Express, Kingdom Hearts Intergram Masterpiece is coming natively to Switch 2. It's ready. Square Enix just has to announce the release date. It's been verified by multiple sources, and it says Attack the Bad Log can confirm it as well. And so that's interesting, right? He talks about that. So as we scroll down here, we see a few other questions to get answered here. Like this one about key cards, and considering that in all the games that take up more than 70 gigabyte, it's probably a key card. So unfortunately, you're probably not looking at a physical version, full physical version. However, it is notable this art that I think is completely fan made doesn't have the key card designation. But one thing I wanted to point out though is he did mention Attack the Backlog, who's a friend of the channel, also backed this rumor, and he can say right here in this tweet, says, I can now say Nash Wheeler and I spoke about this behind the scenes, and I was able to corroborate his statement of Kingdom Hearts Intergram coming to Switch 2 with my own source who told me it's coming to Switch 2. Indeed, Nash does it again. So we got double sources on this stuff. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, of course. These games just being natively on Switch 2 at all is a win. Obviously, we'd prefer if there's full physical, but it is what it is. We have an update on GTA 6 for Switch 2. This update comes via Reese Riley, aka Kiwi Talks, who has said he has a source that has been pretty definitive that it's coming to Switch 2 and coming day and date, which I find to be really interesting since it's not even announced for Switch 2 yet. But Reese Riley hasn't been confident in this source because he has other sources that are linked to Rockstar, and none of them have confirmed it to him. It's just a single source out of India. Now, India does actually have a really, really big studio for Rockstar there that does work on GTA, so it being from India doesn't really matter. But I want to bring this up because he updates today, and Reese Riley is pretty sure he's about to win his bet about it not coming to Switch 2. But here, let's look at this. So I just finished chatting with my source in India who claims that Grand Theft Auto 6 is coming to Switch 2 day and date with PlayStation 5 and Series S and X. And I could tell by his voice, not by what he said, but by his voice, that he's nervous that he might lose our bet. And he'll explain the bet here in a moment. It says, for those who don't know, I have a bet with a source over GTA 6. I bet him a lavish dinner that it won't come day and date with the other versions. I don't think it's going to come at all. He seems to think it will. I am finalizing my dates in June to go to India to see my wife's family this year. And so if it's not announced at that time, then I win. And I'm 100% taking a picture of the meal when I win. No other source I know, and no one I know at Rockstar has said anything either. That is why I believe he is full of shit, despite his somewhat decent track record previously. But again, we also know Rockstar, and this could be to a point why he hasn't heard anything from anyone he knows at Rockstar. Rockstar recently fired a couple people for leaking things about GTA 6 to content creators. So Rockstar is very, very strict about these kind of leaks. And so it is possible that while he knows other people at Rockstar, they're not willing to speak up because they're not willing to put their job on the line. This other person who is still anonymous, just one of like 1,600 employees in India, so doesn't really give Rockstar a lot to work with if they're trying to find the person. To me, I just find the whole thing to be rather fascinating because maybe this person doesn't care, or maybe this person isn't worried about getting caught because of where they work and the country they work in. Maybe there's protections. I don't know. But what I do know is it's an ongoing bet, and we're going to keep following to see what happens because, look, I think GTA 6 can come to Switch 2. Like, I don't think there's a technical reason it can't. I know many people think there's many technical reasons it can't. I actually don't buy that excuse. But whether or not Rockstar actually does it, that's a totally different can of worms because Rockstar has not consistently supported Nintendo over the years. All right, moving on. I wanted to bring up this one thing about Nate the Hate. He recently won an award on like the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit for being like Leaker of the Year 2025. He did start out the year with a bang with the Switch 2 reveal in January. And he seems to actually be kind of appreciative of the fact that he got recognized for being a reliable leaker and maybe one of the most reliable in 2025. But in the replies after he, talked about being a little bit thankful and hopefully being even better at leaking stuff this year, he does put something out there. And that something out there makes me feel really, really good because it's on my fantasy team. We have a fantasy draft team for game reviews, and you guys can actually follow it publicly. I'll put a link down below, but I drafted this game, even though it's not announced yet. Here we go. This person says Rebirth on Xbox still 2026. He says yes. Okay, what does that have to do with Switch 2? Well, the follow-up and Switch 2. Regardless, thanks for the pods you and MVG release and the information you share. Says yes. Remember, the question was Rebirth on Xbox still 2026. Yes. And Switch 2. Yes. So that to me says that Rebirth is coming to Switch 2 in 2026 and Xbox, of course. So that would be really good for me because, again, I have Rebirth on my fantasy team, and I know that one's going to review very well, just like Integrate did. So take that for what you will. Just wanted to throw that out there as, hey, he's saying Rebirth is coming this year to Xbox and Switch 2. All right, next up, we got to talk about some actual news. This stuff comes from a former Nintendo employee. It's not quite 100% clear here, but one of the main masterminds behind the Metroid franchise has now publicly announced that he has made his last game for Nintendo. Kensuke Tanabe announces departure from Nintendo after completing Metroid Prime 4. Risa Tabata will be the successor. All right, scrolling on down. Says producer Kensuke Tanabe recently announced in an interview with Japanese magazine Nintendo Dream that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond was his last work for Nintendo. Here's what he said. When we were developing Metroid Prime Hunters in 2006 for the Nintendo DS, the company responsible for development at that time, which was NST, and its game designers created a complete backstory for all the hunters that appeared. Among these definitions was that Sylix harbors a grudge against Samus and the Galactic Federation. At that time, I wanted to further expand on the Metroid Prime universe and, in the future, create several spin-offs. So, although I thought it possibly already had its own set of definitions, I asked that it not leave the details completely closed yet. While I was planting clues in Metroid Prime 3 and also in elements like the 100% ending of Metroid Prime Federation Force, I kept thinking one day I want to turn the story around Samus and Sylix into a game. After that, it took a long time before the chance to make this game actually arose. Considering my age, I felt that producing a title in this Metroid Prime series this time would probably be the last opportunity. Therefore, I started this project as the first part of the Sylix arc. I defined Sylix as a villain with a dark personality, deep resentment, and vile methods, and from this game onwards, Samus will also realize that, sooner or later, she will have to face him head on. It's inevitable. And she needs to defeat him completely. Precisely for this reason, the confrontation between Sylix and Samus is not yet over. However, the time needed to complete this game was longer than we imagined. And here's where he talks about Nintendo. Furthermore, I've already decided that I will no longer be able to participate in the production of the series going forward. It's not yet decided whether a sequel will be made, but I sincerely hope that someday Miss Tabata and Retro Studios will be able to tell this story to the end and bring it to its conclusion. And obviously, the title is currently available. Now, a couple interesting points in here. One, Tabata obviously stepping away. Hey, man, enjoy your semi-retirement. He doesn't say he's leaving Nintendo. Just this will be the last game he makes for Nintendo. He could move into another executive role or something else at Nintendo, become a fellow that just advises people but isn't directly involved in game making. I don't really obviously know what's going to happen. This generation, I think we're going to see a lot of that because a lot of Nintendo's like long tenured 40 plus year masterminds have been doing this for 40 plus years. So a lot of them are probably going to see retirement over the next handful of years. That said, he didn't really say retirement from Nintendo, just from making games for Nintendo. So again, he could just take on a different role. That said, it is interesting because he did note that this is actually just supposed to be one part of what's likely to be a 3-part series for the Sylix and Samus story. And it's going to be interesting to see if this continues. He does say, Metroid Prime 5 hasn't been greenlit or hasn't gone into production yet. So, that's interesting. So some of the rumors out there about Metroid Prime 5 already being in development, maybe he just kind of debunked those. But either way, the point is that Metroid Prime 4 was supposed to be the beginning of a new story arc. Hopefully that arc does get to see its conclusion, but Nintendo will ultimately determine if they think investing in more Metroid Prime games makes sense for them. I hope they decide to at least give it one more go. I'd be interested to see what kind of Metroid game could exist without Tanabe's influence. I'm not saying his influence is bad or good, That's obviously going to be left up to individuals. I know there's reports out there, but what I do want to see is what is Metroid without him, and yeah, maybe we'll get to find out with a new Metroid Prime game eventually. Next up, we got to talk about another story because there's analysts out there predicting that Switch 2 is going to increase in price. And obviously, Nintendo's Furukawa's already talked about this. So we just got to go over this story quick just so you guys are aware of what's happening in the corporate world for Nintendo. So, Nintendo president is carefully considering the situation as research firm predicts Switch 2 price hike, which is kind of funny because the research firm predicted the price hike after Iwata's words. So, Iwata's words weren't really a response, but they're acting like it's a response anyways. As we go down here, in response to rising prices of RAM and storage in 2026, the Switch 2 may be set to become more expensive. This is according to Nico Partners. In its 2026 prediction post, Nico Partners says, "We believe Switch 2 is set to follow Sony and Microsoft's footsteps with its own price hike driven by the impact from tariffs, increased memory costs, and broader macroeconomic conditions." The report goes on to point out that Nintendo chose to keep the $449 price point last year, despite tariffs impacting production, and it suggests that Nintendo may instead choose to remove the cheapest Switch bundle. This would make buying a Switch 2 more expensive, but only for those looking for a console by itself. If you buy the console in a bundle, it could cost the same, and this is just a prediction. They don't actually know. Tied to the potential price hikes, Nintendo's president Shuntaro Furukawa spoke to Kyoto Shimbun last week. In that interview, Furukawa said, "We procure from suppliers based on our medium to long-term business plans, but the current memory market is very volatile." Adding to this, he said, "There is no immediate impact on earnings, but it is something we must monitor closely." Furukawa doesn't confirm or deny those predictions either way. He goes to say, "While it's difficult to accurately gauge the future impact, our basic policy is to recognize tariffs as a cost, pass them on to the price as much as possible, not just in the US." But then he goes on to say, on the other hand, this is a crucial period for our game business as we promote the adoption of new hardware and maintain the momentum of our platforms. We are working on this while carefully considering the situation. And we know in that same interview, he went to say, "Hey, I don't like to talk about hypotheticals about the future," basically not wanting to comment on if they would raise the price later this year. What's interesting, though, is he did say, hey, well, they do need to consider the tariffs. They do need to consider, obviously, the cost of the system and how much money they're willing to lose per unit. He does note that it's a crucial period for Nintendo. This is a new console. It does not have a massive install base yet. It is not an established success at this point. Like when they raised the price of Switch 1, that was probably an easy decision. They've already sold like 155 million of them. Pretty easy decision that, hey, we're not going to eat losses on Switch 1. We're going to just increase the price. But with Switch 2, it's a little different because they are trying to penetrate the market as much as they can, and raising the price negatively impacts their ability to do that. So there is this pro and con, factor Nintendo has to consider of, hey, if we raise the price, how much do we think that actually impacts the sales? And if we think it impacts the sales too much, is it worth just eating the losses, keeping the cost of the system where it's at, and then hoping you make up for it with increased software sales from a larger install base? There's a lot of things to consider for Nintendo. I don't think it's a guarantee they raise the price this year. I do think there's obviously a chance they raise the price, but again, nothing's for certain until it actually happens. And for right now, nothing has happened. All right. Next up, we got to get to a negative story about Ubisoft. Maybe it's a positive. I don't know. I guess it depends on how you want to spin it. But it says Ubisoft has canceled 6 games, including the Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time remake. Yes, folks, the remake that was rumored to be shadow dropped last week. The remake that literally has been rated by the Peggy boards. Man, like this is kind of interesting. I'm just going to leave it at that. Obviously, they didn't like the quality of whatever this product was that's near completion, but let's go on here. So it says Ubisoft has announced it has canceled 6 games currently in development, including Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, and delayed 7 others. So as part of a larger announcement that it's conducting a major organizational and operational portfolio reset, the company also stated that it had conducted a thorough review of its content pipeline over the past 2 months. This review led to the decision to refocus its portfolio, reallocating resources, and comprehensively revise its roadmap over the next 3 years. Ubisoft said it will focus on a return to exceptional levels of quality on the open world adventure segment, and to step change the group's position in the games as a service native experiences segment. As a result of this, Ubisoft says it has discontinued 6 games, that it felt do not meet the new enhanced quality, as well as a more selective portfolio prioritizing criteria. This means that Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time remake has been canceled, as well as 4 unannounced titles and a mobile title. So if you were hoping for this to confirm the cancellation of Beyond Good and Evil 2, right now, that game is still in active development and has not been canceled, despite being vaporware for nearly 20 years. Kind of crazy they're still not abandoning that. This was the time to cut your losses, and they're not cutting losses with it yet. So there you go. Anyways, Ubisoft also announced it delayed 7 other games to ensure enhanced quality benchmarks are fully met. This includes the unannounced title initially planned for fiscal year 26, which ends March 26. That has been delayed to fiscal year 27. Now, it is believed, and it says here, that the unannounced title that was supposed to be coming out early this year was actually Assassin's Creed Black Flag. In fact, we think it's called Black Flag Resynced because that's what popped up again on a ratings board. And that is supposedly the game that's been delayed. Now, I am seeing people out there being like, oh no, the game's been delayed a year. That's not what they said. They said it is delayed outside of fiscal year 26, which ends in March of 26, and instead will come out in fiscal year of 27, which ends in March of 27. So that means anytime after March, but before March of next year, there should be a Black Flag. This game should come out. This could literally be nothing more than a couple month delay. There's no guarantee it's a year delay. They're just not going to force it out when it's not ready. And again, Ubisoft says that a lot of this is just to focus on quality instead of quantity. This all sounds nice. As gamers, we always want to hear that the game publishers and all that and the game makers care about the quality of the game more than they care about when it's going to come out, more than they care about obviously having a wide swath of games coming out very quickly. But this is still one of those stories where you kind of have to sit back and just look at things at face value and wonder, can Ubisoft really make it about face and care about quality just like that? I'd like to think so, but proof will be when games come out. So anyways, we have one more story to go to, and this is actually a positive one. It's about a game that is not yet announced for Switch 2, but technically leaked through GameStop, then re-leaked again through our podcast with Kiwi Talks, Crimson Desert. So this is from the official account on X. It says, we're thrilled to announce that Crimson Desert has gone gold. On behalf of the team at Pearl Abyss, thank you to our fans around the world for your support, for reaching this milestone with us. Stay tuned for more news, and see you in Piewell on March 19th. Now, I played this game at PAX East and PAX West, and honestly, it was a blast. It is not an easy game. I want to be very clear about this. This is not intended to be an easy game, but it is very much a really fun game with a really massive world, really intricate controls and combat and storytelling. And yeah, it's rather fascinating. And supposedly is coming to Switch 2, according to Kiwi Talks and according, I wouldn't want to say our sources. We asked them at PAX West straight up if it was coming to Switch 2, and they just kind of, oh, people want it on Switch 2, huh? It's like, hint, hint, wink, wink, nod, nod, you know, saying it without saying it kind of thing. So anyways, yeah, whether it's day and date, that I don't know, but supposedly coming out later this year. Just wanted to deliver that positive news that it has gone gold, which means it is complete. The game's ready to go. It is playable start to finish, mostly bug-free. That's amazing. All right, guys. That said, I am Nathaniel Robojans from Nintendo Prime. And as I said, I got a lot of stuff to do. I got a really busy day, and we have a podcast tonight. That's some busyness on top. So, no more gilding the lily anymore. Let's go ahead and see you in the next video or on the podcast tonight.